Hi and welcome again. So today I'm gonna show you something different from what I usually talk about. Usually I talk about security or something in the area of security, but today I'm gonna actually show you guys a piece of code, a very easy architectural approach to how you can develop web applications with Java. Okay, so what I'm using here is actually servlets. However, it doesn't really matter what you're gonna use. If you want to use Spring for Java, which is very popular, this would be exactly the same almost. Of course, a few things would be different because Spring use just a tad more annotations that I do when I just do plain old Java servlets. So the reason I'm using plain old Java servlets for this example is that servlets is the actual bare bone. There is no magic behind the scenes in the same way that, when you use Spring, it's like boom and you have a lot of stuff going on. So this is a little more easy to understand, and by no means I'm no star master programmer or anything, or trying to be. I'm just showing you one good approach to how you can create a medium-sized architectural approach to develop Java simple or medium size web applications. So what we're looking at here is, and you should be watching this video in high definition, you will see the overall main structure. Under main, in Java we have a library or package called config, and then we have a package called controllers, and dependencies, models, persistence. Inside that we have the DAO or DAO object folder or package. Then we have another package here called services. We have the actual web app with a web inf and the web XML and one index file, and this is a Maven project, so you will see the popular POM XML file. Alright, so you might think, okay, so all these folders, what are they used for? Okay, so I'm gonna explain to you pretty fast what the different packages and folders are used for. The folder called, or package, I'm probably gonna say folder, so let's stick to that, called config, contains a file called readme. If you open that, it kind of talks about it. If you have some sort of parts in your app that require config or any soft, I don't know why I wrote that, this is the place to put it. So if you're using, let's say, filters in Java, it's a typical thing to use filters when you're doing login functionality, right? You could place it in config. If you have some code that require you to very difficult to make up examples if you don't have anything here, so that's why I actually created the readme files for you guys, so you can read them and say, oh yeah, that's the place where I'm gonna place this. It could be that you needed some configuration for some sort of communication with external APIs. Could also be a place to have it. It kind of, you can also create subfolders inside of it. It doesn't really matter. Controllers is a bit more easy to explain because this is just a standard MVC setup. So of course I do have my little folder called controllers, and inside of that we have a readme file, and it's just gonna tell you that this contains servlets or controllers, and you can create controllers for different paths inside of this folder called controllers. I created a sample controller here, and this is a servlet, a web servlet. It's basically just a method that intercepts the post requests, and another message down here that intercepts the GET requests from the HTTP protocol. I mean the HTTP client, the one that's trying to communicate with your application. So of course you could expand this to do update and delete and whatever you needed to intercept HTTP protocol wise. Okay, so I'm gonna press enter here for you guys. So basically, this is just the standard code you get, the MT2 methods. I haven't really, put much into the get, a little bit into the post, just to show that you can do some servlet path requests, saving the string, and basically just ask, well, is this a login? You're trying to ask a /login, then you create a new login service, and you're checking if the user is not logged in, and if the user is logged in, well, then kind of no reason to try to log the user in again. But then again, this is just sample functionality. This is by no means finished or done or fine smacked or anything. So it's just to show you guys where to place stuff. This is my example, of course. And of course, if you are not logged in, then you fetch the actual username and password, and that will be done with the lines of code which are commented out here. And the actual naming of the HTML input fields would be username and password. I don't remember what I put inside the index.jsp file. It is very empty. However, websites are pretty crazy, as we know. Okay, so this is just for GET request, and basically this is if you just go to the actual website. The in my case it would be localhost, but it could also be a domain name. Then it will load the index.jsp file. So for controllers, this is the place where I would put them. You can have multiple controllers. You can have one front controller intercepting all requests, calling and instantiating different kind of other sub areas to how could you say, lead you through the application. So I'm going to close down the config and the controllers and this one and go directly to the folder called dependencies. Inside dependencies I have a readme file. It talks about, contains classes such as database connections, other classes with importance for running the app. So basically that. So I created two files here. I have a normal Java file and a little interface. So I like to use interfaces a lot when I code. I'm implementing the MySQL connection, which is this file here, which is also the same name of the interface. And basically it's it just contains two signatures for two different methods, and basically this creates the loose coupling that right now is not usable because we have no other connection ways. However, if we had, let's say, a MySQL and a Oracle SQL and a MS for Microsoft SQL and so on, I'm pretty sure we would like the same methods to connect and disconnect to be used throughout the whole application, so we can just, easy switch which kind of connection class we're using, and do not really worry about rewriting our code all the time that we change our database connection. This is at least what the loose coupling principle is about. However, this is not a programming class, so I'm gonna skip the boring trivialities and continue straight onwards. So the dependencies folder could contain many different things. I think I covered that, so I'm gonna continue to the models folder. Now the model folder also contains a readme file called contains Pojo objects. And for you guys that doesn't really understand what the Pojo word is for, it stands for plain old Java objects. So in good old MVC terms, when you're doing Java applications, usually that would be your classes that would contain the data you need to manipulate, show, or insert to, for example, database. So that could just be a total normal class, just like this, a user class, an example of course, just containing username and password and some different methods to use the data from these two classes. So you might even ask, why all this? And well, it's very common when you use Java, you need to use, the data Gotta give them another name. Carrier objects, data carrier objects, or you use them as data wrappers or anything. Anyways, everything is an object in Java, so you need to have an object. If you are a Spring fan or you're doing Spring programming in Java, this is just very normal for you. And a model is in this case, in all cases, I would say, just a normal class to contain a single instance of something. In this particular case, it's a user. Depending on which library you're using or framework or whatever using Spring in Java, you might even need to annotate these kind of classes in some way, and but in this case it is not Spring, so it is not annotated at all. Alright, so I think I covered that folder. The folder called persistence is a bit more advanced, so let's look at the overall in the first README file. The first README file tells me that the raw database works happen here, SQL sentences are here. So any SQL sentence will be wrote in this particular folder. Now you might even think, isn't that a great deal of work to do in order to just create a standard select star, all from whatever? Well, depending on which kind of application you're creating, you can use this setup if you want to use it, or you can create your own, but I strongly suggest that you do some sort of order to your code. So I'm just going to close the DAO for now, and there's a login DAO implementation right here, and it basically implements something called login DAO, which is inside the DAO, data access object folder. However, this is also created with the mindset of having loose coupling. So I am creating a private instantiation variable for my interface, which is called IMC, and I am creating a actual instance, creating it from the MySQL instance and saving it in the IMC variable. And this contains the method called verify credentials. This is just a normal example. Just to look at the interface itself, it only contains one method called verify credential user. Verify credentials, actually. Yeah. Okay. So I do have one more method, but that is the actual constructor. So it's not really a part of the interface. Okay, so that's fine. So what about the DAO folder? It also contains a README file, and it tells you this is the place for all DAO classes. If you don't know what DAO is, it's called Data Access Object, and usually it's used when you're doing web applications. You have a lot of different functionalities for users, for logins, for admins. So you divide your functionality into different classes, at best into interfaces, so you can abstract it away, so you have the loose coupling principle. And there are different ways for you to actually create a smarter setup than just the bare bone one I have. So this is again just standard setup you can use if you wish to, but it still requires some work before it is production ready. So I'm gonna close down the things here and close down the persistence folder and go right away to the service. Alright, so the service folder also contains a README file and says all business logic. There we go. So far we only talked about structure and persistence and all these kind of things. So I know the layers didn't come in the appropriate step by step 1 to 3 way. I mentioned persistence first. However, the correct connection is controller service persistence and backwards persistence service controller. So the actual login service, which is also created from an interface, I'm just going to show you the interface itself. 3 different methods. Verify login is logged in, and it's implemented right here. And as you see, I have my login DAO variable created or instantiated here, which I instantiate another class called login data implementation into that, and from that I can use it. However, I didn't do much code in this case. It's just a simple representation of where stuff should be placed. This would be the place where you were storing all your business logic. So this is just for the login. You might even create subfolders in the service if it gets bigger, and I suggest you do. But you can have different kind of functionalities saved in different kind of folders for login, for encryption, for security, like a more overall security folder. For it's difficult to just find different cases, but I think I mentioned a few already, and it should be enough to get an overall understanding. So that's the service folder, and README first. It kind of contains the overall structure called controller service persistence, and some text. I suggest you read it. Also something about loose coupling, about models, and kind of what I overall think you should focus on. Controller, service, and persistence. Controller contains the URL request and call services. Services process data validated, algorithm, business logic, and persistence sends the data directly to the database. This is at least a very basic setup that I suggest you start off with. Some argue that you do and that you have a second lower persistent layer, so the first persistent layer is more like then you prepare the data to be inserted to a database. It's not directly as I write it. However, it's kind of up to you in a way, and the more serious your application gets, you learn while you're coding, you learn while doing stuff, you might end up creating a second or third folder to some of these, and that's totally fine. This is just a typical approach, and I suggest you start with that. Alright, so inside the web app, we have the webinf and the web.xml folder, which is basically just having some URLs for the root of my some controller, which is inside the controller. Some controller file there, so it points to that. And basically, if you wanna learn more about how to configure your web path, you should look at the web.xml, but I think you might even know the kind of things when you're a Java programmer. And inside the not the webinf but the web app folder, we have the file called index.jsp, and that is the file we're exposing to the World Wide Web or to the internet. It is also in a public place, so that is actually the way to go. So one thing I would like to mention is that we do have one thing we haven't covered yet, and that is the use of webinf. Okay, so I'm aware that the webinf folder is hidden from the World Wide Web. It is the folder where you can have stuff that you cannot, and I'm gonna stress this, you cannot access that through a browser. So some people say and argue that why don't you place all your sensitive JSP file inside the webinf folder and then grant access to that data inside the webinf folder through your classes, through some place. Let's see if I have it already so I can show you. It's in the controller. So what if I access the webinf here directly in the code? That would only be possible if I, let's say, granted access through a login token. Then I could write the code in a way to do that, because then I added the extra layer of functionality already, that all my sensitive logged in JSP, I need to be logged in order to access these JSP files, were placed inside the webinf folder. Aha, then I would win that. Well, I understand that this is a really good conceptual idea. However, the original way of doing all this is done by using something called filters. And filters is another functionality you can use. It's really easy to configure. It's just a class, okay? It's some code, and then you write some things in it until this is not accessible and this is accessible if you're logged in and blah blah blah. Okay, so that is the original and the way that is suggested you do. However, nothing is stopping you from placing stuff inside the webinf. It is just not conventional. It is not the correct usage. So basically, you have like the white and the red devil, right? You have the angel and the devil in your hand. You're looking at it and like, yeah, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? So I'm not gonna answer the question for you. You need to figure that out yourself. I just told you that this is a possibility. If you use it, you use it. Will someone come knock you on your head? Well, depending on who you work with, if it's like a heavy reader that kind of likes documentation and doing it the right way, probably yes. If not, probably not. Make up your mind. So all this code can be found in the link below in the description, pointing to my GitHub, no, not GitHub, Dropbox repository. Yes. And then you can download it. It's a zip file, and that's about it. So I hope you like this code, and if you have some suggestions or idea for it, please leave it in the comment below. I'm not really the biggest fan of writing a lot of code all day long, so if I really find it interesting and it's just compellingly strong, I might even add it and then re-edit and create a small comment in the description below that I edited the code. So thank you so far. I hope you would subscribe, like the video, and if you have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I will most definitely reply to it. Bye.